So, welcome to Module 1 of Dreams. Um, Module 1 is Discovery and Realization. So, here we're going to discover what lucid dreams are and then realize how to lucid dream and explore some of those techniques that are really important to getting us into a lucid dream state. So, we'll start off by talking about what an actual lucid dream is. Lots of people have different opinions about what lucid dreaming is, right? Some
hmm
people really just imply that lucid dreams are all about control, and so they're like, if I'm lucid, I'm in control of my dream, right? And
Okay.
there's a lot of debate about that, about what it means to be in control of a dream, right? And so that would be a first indicator that you're lucid is being aware that you're dreaming, okay? So we'll dumb it down to that. So when you're in a lucid dream, you
Okay.
immediately recognize that you're dreaming. You're like, I am dreaming. Some type of awareness occurs that allows you to see that you're in a dream state, right? So not necessarily does there need to be any sense of control over the dream experience, just the awareness of being aware in the dream is a lucid dream state. And some people really narrow the lucid dream experience into having that control over the dream experience, but there's a lot of debate about that, like I said. And the reason there's debate about it is because sometimes in the dream experience, you may think you're in control, right? And you look around in the dream experience itself, and you see all the things and all the objects and all the experiences of the dream itself, but if you are in control of the dream experience, then who is making the environment around you, right? So
Right.
there's something creating the dream experience, right? But and you're a person in the dream and you think you're in control of the environment or the experience itself, but something is actually manifesting the experience around you, right? So
Right.
um, even though you think you're in control, there's something ahead of you. We can call it the narrator or something like that, right? I call it the narrator. Something outside of you that is actually creating the dream world and the experience that you're encountering, right? And some people imply that that even is something that creates the experience of being aware too. So, um, say I'm a dreamer, I'm in a dream, right? And I'm having a normal dream, not a lucid dream, right? All the memories and all the experiences that I have of the dream itself seem perfectly natural to me, right? So I could be doing
hmm
the most bizarre things imaginable, but as a unconscious dreamer, I think it's totally normal. Like nothing is out of the norm, right? It's like,
Okay.
oh, I'm riding a bike upside down, and that's totally something that I always do, and I know no different. But the dream itself is giving me the memories and the experience of that as totally normal, right? That seems perfectly acceptable to me until I have awareness that something is abnormal in the dream experience, contrary to waking life, right? I don't ride bikes upside down, so therefore I'm probably dreaming, right? But
Right.
the awareness itself has to come from somewhere, right? And the memories and the experiences that you're having in a dream that seem totally normal to you also come from somewhere. So the awareness itself that tells you that you're lucid or that you're dreaming is the same place that the dream memory comes from normally. So thinking that you're in control of the dream and that's why you're lucid is kind of like an error in logical understanding because the dream itself is what gave you the understanding that you're in a dream because it can provide you
Makes
anything.
sense.
Yeah, so
Gotcha.
I know that can be a hard concept to understand, but the error in the logic is that control is actually what gives you lucidity. That's not true. Something else gives you lucidity, an awareness that's already outside of the dream. So it's not the dream that's giving you lucidity, it's yourself outside of the dream. So it's just
Gotcha.
like waking life. Like sometimes we have moments of awareness where we're like, oh, we can step outside of the experience of reality and the things occurring to us and see a bigger picture of things, right? Um, that comes from something inside of us that we've nurtured and built up to give us lucidity. And the same thing goes with lucid dreams. And it doesn't mean that I can control my reality, right? At that point, I'm not a true magician, but um, some people might be. I'm not, but it does give me a level of awareness of the experience that I'm having and allow me to interact with it differently. So um, that kind of gives us a little bit different perspective of what a lucid dream is. It doesn't mean that you can't control some aspects of the dream, right? But it just makes you say, okay, I'm still not the one in control of the dream world, right? I am, but I'm not. My conscious self isn't, but my whatever I am, the totality of what I am is maybe in control, but
Right.
not my personal ego. Um, so characteristics of a lucid dream is, awareness in dream state, and we've talked about that. Sometimes having control over the dream. Vividness is a clear indication of being aware in a dream. Oftentimes, people that suddenly have awareness in a lucid dream, they they examine things and they see that their things are very vivid, right? There's a reality and a realness to things that typically aren't there, such as maybe the words of, I felt like it was more real than real, right? It has a next level of realness. If you talk to people that have had psychedelic experiences, they often describe the same things. They say, oh, it was more real than real. So it has a sense of vividness that is beyond uh, the normal senses that we experience, and we can go into that and say, well, there's there's not the limitation of senses in a lucid dream experience, right? There's not the limitation of experiences that you typically have in waking reality. Sometimes people have
Right.
like 3D vision or 360-degree vision, I'd say. So like they can see
Mm.
all the way around them at all times, which isn't something that you can do clearly when you're awake. Um, you can hear things in multiple layers that you can't typically hear. So you can hear something far away as if it was close, right? Things like that. Things that don't make sense, right? To normal waking reality. So the senses are, um, they're not physically created by, like the ear or the eye. So it's created by the mind, so you can see things that you typically can't see in ways that you can't typically see, right?
Mhm.
Emotional intensity is also another one. Sometimes people feel very emotional. They feel excited, ecstatic, maybe fearful, things like that that are instant, that are amplified during these emotional or these awakening states that we typically don't have when we're awake, they get very excited, and that can be an indicator. And then people that are lucid, they have the potential for conscious exploration. It provides a potential for exploring your dream environment in a way that you typically don't. So for me, when I become lucid, I kind of check out of almost of the dream experience that's typically there. So it's like, oh, this is nice, but I got better things to do. So
Mm.
I just
Right.
uh, journey on my own way and leave the dream behind. The normal narrative that's taking place around me. So
Right.
that's pretty common for people, I think, at least for me, and it's been shared with me a few times for other people. So the significance behind lucid dreaming, um, we can all create our own reasons for why we want to lucid dream and why it's significant to our lives. But it offers us a perspective into our dream experiences in a way that people, it's atypical of people that have normal dreams, right? Like a normal dream, it's very narrative driven. You don't have any input into it. You're unconscious and you just play the role that you're presented to you. But in a lucid dream, you can step out of that role and you can start asking, maybe you ask dream characters about introspective questions about who you are and who they are, depending on how you see those dream characters. Maybe you'll encounter guides or something like that that will give you information that you're not aware of. Maybe you'll encounter things in your dream experiences that are maybe scary or even positive that you weren't expecting, and they'll lead you into directions that you never really thought were possible. And interacting with different aspects of um, people and things in different ways than you typically would when you're awake, and that might give you an introspective into who you are really, like um, maybe some of the darker aspects of yourself, but also the lighter aspect of yourself. So,
Mm.
there's a lot of unpack there about the significance of the experience. It's quite significant. And the benefits of lucid dreaming, there's many. Um, many cultures throughout the world have taught how to lucid dream for various reasons. But some reasons for us to explore lucid dream, it would be creativity and innovation. Sometimes you can learn things about yourself and the world around you and the experience that you have and things you didn't understand, or you may discover things about things you didn't think were possible in there. So that could lead to creating new things. Many creative people have been inspired from lucid dreams, especially in the recent times that we've known about.
Mm.
So um, in the past times, a lot of people didn't really know what lucid dreams were, so they weren't as vocal about it, and they weren't able to find that experience itself. So they attribute it to different
Right.
things, and but there's still creativity expressed in that. Problem solving. Myself and many other people have had experiences in lucid dreams where we encounter problems and we work through those problems and things like that, and can go through there. And personal growth, I would attribute to that almost as problem solving itself. Personal growth is a problem, a lot of for a lot of us, and lucid dreams
Right.
can help us kind of break through some of those barriers. Emotional healing. A lot of trauma comes up in lucid dreams for a lot of people. It's not really discussed a lot in many of the lucid dream communities out there, but people that take lucid dreams seriously and have worked in the environment for a long period of time will always talk about the emotional healing through trauma and experiences that they've had in lucid dreams, um, and have healed from that. And I'd love to share some experiences of my own from lucid dreams that have healed emotional trauma. Um, One experience is that I became lucid and I encountered a object in my lucid state. It was an an aspect of myself, and I was able to have a conversation with that object and build a relationship to it, and then eventually merge into each other. And it created, when I woke up from that experience, I felt I felt, united and together again versus like separated um, and I should say I didn't fully understand the experience from like um, a conscious perspective, but just the act of
Oh
doing
yeah.
that created a healing experience when I was awake. So there's a lot to be said about having awareness and engaging with different aspects of yourself in a lucid dream. Um, and learning. Some people have learned new skills and practices in a lucid state, so like read books and things like that. I haven't personally done anything like that, but some people have that are very skilled lucid dreamers, they can open up a book in a lucid dream state and actually read the
Mm,
book and things like that, and learn new skills and stuff that they wouldn't be able to do when they're awake. Um,
interesting.
so there's a lot, yeah, there's a lot to unpack on and and lucid dreaming, and it's not to say that everyone's able to do all the same things in a lucid state. You know, like some people are skilled in different ways to do different things. Some people are gifted in lucid dreams. Some people, they're like, oh, I lucid dream every night, and it's easy to judge yourself against those people. You're like, oh well, who am I? I don't lucid dream every night, But it's not like those people are doing the same things that you're doing, are skilled in the same things that you're doing in a lucid dream state, and maybe it takes more work for you to become lucid, um, but you have advantages and disadvantages that they don't have. So I would say no one should be judging themselves against anybody else when it comes to lucid dreaming. It's your experience. It's about you. It's not about other people, right? So, um, so just take that as a, way to move
Mm,
forward with your own practice, right? We call lucid dreaming a practice because it's just like a martial art. It's not hurry up and get there kind of thing. It's a lifetime thing that you work with, you develop, and then it's like an artwork, right? You work art on yourself, not with other people. Um, so we're going to move into the science of and history of lucid dreaming. Um,
okay.
lucid dreaming has a long history in human culture. As far back as the Egyptians, they describe oftentimes in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, as well as some of their drawings, things of having lucid type dream experiences. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it's essentially written in a way to describe a lucid dream experience. So,
Mm,
um, you could say that death and dying itself is actually somewhat related to lucid dreaming because they're very similar. Um, if you think about people that have died or and come back, right? Um, it's very similar to a dream, right? Because how else would
right.
you describe something like that? So you could see the correlation between a dream experience and a memory of a death experience. They're very, very similar in many ways. Um, to Tibetans, they're probably the ones that take it the most serious throughout our histories. That we have knowledge and a continued language that we can actually understand about those experiences, and they still today practice um, a dream practice called dream yoga. And many things that I've
Oh.
learned about lucid dreaming come from Tibetan dream yoga. And so, um, when you look at the word yoga, we typically think of stretching and and the American version of yoga, but yoga means to yoke together. So it means to bring together, the spiritual aspect and the physical aspect into one. And so when they're
Right.
talking about dream yoga, they're talking about using dreams as a means to bring together, um, the spiritual and the physical into one. And in Tibetan dream yoga, they're not so much interested in dreaming or controlling the dream. They're really interested in getting past the dream experience itself. So they call it a white dream experience. So you have the typical dream experience where you're encountering, objects and themes and all this good
Hmm.
stuff that brings up a lot of drama in the world, right? But when it gets to like Buddhism and yoga and Zen and stuff like that, they're really interested in just like not partaking in anything that has to do with drama and getting
Oh.
absorbed by God again, right? They're like, I want to escape this whole experience of whatever this thing is that everyone else is really interested in and get absorbed back into the one thing and evaporate, right? Like I'm done. And so when they're trying to get into a dream experience. They want to get into what's called the white light experience, which is essentially beyond the dream itself is a white light experience, which is it has no image, no experience really whatsoever besides maybe an emotional, blissful experience that they may feel, but it's beyond
Mm.
anything visual, you know. So it removes all the drama. There's no narrative. There's no nothing. It's just white, and they're getting
Mm.
absorbed by that. And that's really kind of the apex of the Tibetan Buddhist dream yoga experience. So that's their kind of like spiel on lucid dreaming. The Egyptians, they more use lucid dream experiences as a practice to engage with the death process. So they would, in the Tibetan, or not Tibetan, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it's really a description of what to do when you're dying. So they're trying to memorize a series of events that take place, and they know what to do when that happens, and they extend their consciousness into the death experience without blanking out as they die. So they kind of had this idea that if you lost consciousness at some point in the death process, then you would kind of just uh, blank out. You would forget, right?
Right.
And then you would probably be reincarnated or something like that. And they wanted just to keep it going as long as you possibly could, so that when you dead and you are dead, you're transferred over into this other environment, and
Mhm.
um, and you continue on. Um, the Greeks also used lucid dreams. They talked about in their philosophies, and it wasn't. It's not super clear as to what they were doing, but using substances and drinks and things like that. Dionysus, I think, was a big play into the dream experience and healing and
Mhm.
getting blessings and things like that from that. So that's kind of where the history comes from, as well as far back as we can with the practice. There are some context in modern Western religion that goes back to like the Hebrew religion that talks about dream experiences that you can find where people had visions and experiences in a lucid state, though they don't really describe it as having lucidity. They still thought they were dreaming in a sense, but they describe sensations and effects that happen in a lucid dream state, or similar states like hypnagogia, it's called, where you encounter sounds or paralysis or visitations from seemingly outside entities and things
Think.
like that that would imply some type of lucidity almost without the awareness. So, and that gets a little confusing, like uh, in the sense that you can be outside of the dream experience and you could be aware that you're yourself, but you're not aware that you're actually dreaming. So that's
Right.
kind of confusing. So there's so many layers to lucid dreaming that makes it really a kind of a challenging thing to even talk about in some ways. But
Right.
um, like even you can read the account of the three wise men hearing the angels singing and the trumpets and things like that, and to get told about Jesus' birth. That would be considered a lucid dream experience, dealt
Mhm.
in
Revelate.
hypnagogia.
Re- Revelations alone. John was he talks in the very beginning of it that when he was spending time with the spirit. So it means he wasn't completely asleep. He was in a lucid state. And so then the way that it reads in a
Yeah,
dreamlike experience.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Visionary states are very, very common in a lucid dream state. I mean, visionary state
Mm-hmm.
is like an altered state
Right.
And a lot of people think, oh, well, I need to be on some substance to have a visionary state, but anybody that's ever really delved into like psychedelics can realize very quickly it doesn't take a lot for us to have visionary states. So there's many mechanisms that can cause a semi psychedelic or a semi altered state without having to ingest anything. And clearly, being tired and um, exhausted or even um, in the right position, the right time can cause visionary states to people. There's some examples of like being near certain materials on the earth, such as like um, piezoelectric um, minerals during an earthquake or something like that can create a large electrical
Oh,
discharge in the earth, and then it causes an alteration in the person and they start experiencing some type of visionary experience even though they've not ingested anything and they're normal,
sure.
and in multiple people too. So um,
Interesting.
yeah, so the lucid experience of a dream state can extend well past going, closing your eyes and going to sleep. It can
Right.
it can cross over, and that's what some of the power of being lucid and having these experiences give you, so that you can recognize the sensations and the feelings and the visions that occur and be like, oh, well,
Mm.
this is where I am at, versus like the common person that just has it happen to them and they go, wow, that was insane, and they go on their life. But um, the term lucid dreaming is actually coined from a man named Frederick Van Eden, and he's a Dutch psychiatrist in the late 19th century. And Frederick Van Eden is an interesting character because he was profound in the same period that Freud and Jung were, and we've talked about those two guys before in court, um, and dealing with archetypes. But Van Eden, he wrote a book called The Bride of Dreams and some papers dealing with lucid dreams. And he was in correspondence with both Freud and Jung during his life. And both Freud and Jung wrote about him, and Freud was in correspondence with them. And the importance about this is that it can be said that Van Eden actually kind of inspired Freud to look at dreams in a different way than was typical at the time. So Freud spoke very highly of Van Eden, and Van Eden had a very um, fruitful imagination when it comes to lucid dreams. I remember he wrote this book called The Bride of Dreams. It was essentially, he called it, I think, the blue book to him, and which is interesting because if we know anything about Jung, Jung wrote
This
something
is
called
red.
his called the Red Book.
Wasn't the red book?
Yeah,
Interesting.
and we didn't know about the Red Book until I think 2016ish or something close to that. And when it was published by Freud or Jung's family, it was held in secret until then. And um, the little drama that I love to go into on this is that Jung, he when asked about if he knew who Van Eden was, he said, "Oh, I barely know him. I don't know. He's kind of a cook or something like that," and uh, blew him off as nothing, right? But then if you go to the correspondence in Jung's stuff, we can see that Jung corresponded with this man and
Hmm.
had some interesting conversations, and so it's like, okay, maybe there was some influence in Jung's Red Book
Hmm.
writings and things like that because Van Eden had published his Blue Book way prior to Jung even
That
creating
was
his stuff.
that's what I was gonna that's
Yeah,
what I was gonna ask is when did the
yeah.
blue book get published? So that's
You know,
interesting.
it's
I'll have to look that up.
it's it human nature is pretty common, when it comes to like, oh, I did that and he didn't do that, kind of thing. And I could see
Right.
Jung kind of playing into that here. Uh, you know, Van Eden, if you read about his, if you read his book, which is published, the Dreams of the Bride, or the Bride of the Dreams, sorry. Um, it's very personal. It's very much like a poem to his dreams. You know, it's quite poetic and inspirational to somebody creating their own dream journal of lucid experiences, um,
Mm.
in that, and it also being very open to other people reading it, you know, since it's published at that time. So inspirational for other people
Mm.
to maybe look at and say, oh, that person
Definitely going
really
to
went
check
out
that out.
there.
Yeah.
It was hard for me to find that one,
Right.
but a little background about me, you know, I took I was in a PhD program for Jungian depth psychology, and so I was very much into Jung and his work, and really found that there's some contradictions, you know, like of who I thought Jung was and who he really kind of was, you know, based on the information I
Mm.
read. And one of them was Van Eden. Really kind of woke me up to be like, oh, you know, there's some other people out there that really kind of paved the way for things I'm really interested versus Jung, you know. And Jung was more of like
Yeah.
conservative. I'd say more conservative than Van Eden, and also didn't know a lot that Van Eden did. There's a lot to say about reading a lot of books and having experience, right? And experience sometimes
Right.
pays off a lot more than reading books. You know, you can know a lot of things, but if you don't experience them, then then you really don't know. Um, and Jung actually had a lucid dream, even though he never, as far as I could find, he never really openly mentioned lucid dreams. But he did
Mm.
have a lucid type experience where he described a lucid experience where he's like he fell into this blackness, this void type space, and then he was able to do some stuff, and it to me, because I've had the experience so many times, I go, oh, I know what that experience is, so I know where he was in the dream experience, and then what he did made sense to me as being like, oh, he was lucid, but he didn't realize the term to put on that. Um,
Right.
and sometimes that's the problem with older works is like you're like, oh, okay, like they were doing the same thing as I've been doing, but they don't know the words to put on it, you know.
Right.
We find that with religious works quite often, you know, like
How how old is the terminology lucid? How old is that
so Van Eden
word?
was the first person to coin that term. So, and that was in the 19th century. So before that, it's never
Okay.
mentioned lucid, you know, lucid dreaming. Um,
Hmm.
it would be described as a dream or even as maybe death, you know. Prior
Sure.
to that, they wouldn't know the difference because it was a lucid dream is so dramatic that and oftentimes terrifying for people that they don't know what's
Hmm.
happening. You know, they just they go, oh, something happened to me that is atypical to most people, and I don't know how to talk to them about it, and they think, oh, you died. You know, like you clearly died
Right.
and all stuff. And now today we kind of know a little bit of the differences between those, so we know terms to use and can segregate those out a little bit better than they could before. Um, so as we move forward through time, we start looking to the scientific research. You know, as the scientific process starts developing more, and we come into Stephen LeBerg, who is oftentimes credited as like the the lucid dreaming guru kind of guy, and
Hmm.
he is noted as the first scientist to create scientific evidence of lucid dreaming. So he trained a couple people on his technique to lucid dream, and then he had people um, remember to move their eyes back and forth um, when they became lucid in a dream. So when you're asleep, your entire body is paralyzed besides your eyes, and
Right.
you're able to move your eyes back and forth normally in a dream as if you're looking at things. And if you're lucid, then you can consciously move your eyes back and forth in the dream state, right? So you're like, okay, I'm aware, I'm dreaming. Oh yeah, I remember I'm supposed to move my eyes back and forth in this pattern. So I'll start doing that now, right? And Stephen LeBur's recorded that. So somebody, a few people went in, moved their eyes back and forth in the pattern that he instructed them to, and then they're like, okay, you're lucid. We recorded it.
Right.
We repeated it. It's scientific now. So that's the basis of it. That's also why they call it REM, right? Random eye movement, because when you're in dream states, your eyes move back and forth because you're in your dream, you're looking back and forth at things. So your eyes move back and forth. So he's the first person to really kind of document that. He's written a number of books on lucid dreaming, and they're very good books. And we'll talk about some of the techniques, one of the main techniques that he used in his research as we go through this module, actually. So, and then later on, neuroscience through, you know, fMRI practices, so imaging of the brain during lucid dream states, isolated the certain areas of the brain to be lit up, the most active when people are in a lucid dream state. So
Right.
um, it's like the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Um, I'm not so much interested in the regions of the brain, but there are some like technologies that are kind of being developed to be associated with certain parts of the brain so that it actually like some people have made technology that shocks the brain in certain areas of the brain um, when you're asleep. So it's like, oh, you're in REM stage sleep now. Let's, put a little current through this part of your brain. Okay, now, you know, maybe you become lucid. So um,
Hmm.
there's a huge tech push for lucidity, right? Because what, people would pay outrageous amounts of money to have the ability to control their dreams, like that's a pretty big deal.
Right.
But and I bought into that and went down many different roads for for using
Mm.
tech to lucid dream and stuff like that. And it always comes back to the easiest, the best method is to just kind of do the process and work through it. Yeah,
The natural way. Yeah, yeah,
because it
yeah,
goes back to
absolutely.
like who's actually creating the lucidity in the first place, because it's something you can force or not. It's a
Mm.
very big debate, um, but there's some technology out there that clearly helps.
Mm. Yeah.
One technology is supplements. So we don't go into supplements in this course just because of the I'd say legality associated with supplements and ingesting things
Oh,
and
yeah.
kind of chasing the dragon of like what supplement does what in the brain, things like that.
Sure.
But there are supplements that clearly help lucid dreams, and I'll share one of those links later on. Um, so now we're going to get into the techniques on actually achieving lucid dreams. So we went through like the history and the science behind it, and and now we're going to get into the actual application, like how do you get into the lucid dream? And um, there's a few techniques out there, and the reason that we really narrow down on certain techniques before I get into them is because there's peer-reviewed science behind these techniques. There's
Okay.
lots of different techniques out there, um, and people continually make more. But the difference between somebody making a technique of their own and a peer-reviewed one is the peer-reviewed ones are showing repeatable scientific evidence that they actually work, and they've been studied to show that they work consistently for most people. Um, so the ones that we're going to share with you are the most effective. It doesn't mean it would be
Mm.
effective for you. It means that it is effective for the most people consistently if done, as prescribed. There's other techniques out there that may be effective for you, say, uh, one off, right? Sometimes a technique has helped me to be lucid that I've never tried before. Maybe because that's a placebo effect. Essentially, I'm interested in it. I'm talking about lucid dreaming. Even us having a conversation about lucid dreaming, um, or you watching this video or whatever, may trigger you to have a lucid experience. And then you're like, wow, that really was effective. This technique that I was doing, but it's actually a conversation that we had. It's not the technique. And then you go and you're like, well, I'm not having it anymore, but I'm still doing the technique over and over again. It's not doing anything.
Mm,
So what's the deal?
mhm.
Well, that's why it's so important to kind of narrow down on the most effective techniques available to you and really
Right.
kind of exhaust that as a possibility for you to have a lucid experience and then move on to more complex things that may be more effective. I can tell you honestly that I've spent the better parts of 20 years going through different supplements, different techniques, trying to unravel which ones is working, which one's not working. Why
Mm,
is this, like I combine these three together and this one, is it seems to be effective, but which one's actually doing it? It's like once you start adding and removing and doing all these things, it's really like you have a mess of wires together and you don't know which plug is plugging into what. You're
right.
like, oh, geez. So sometimes it's better just to start over from scratch. Clear out everything and just start with one and then build off of that. So that's why we're
Mm,
really sticking to these very fundamental things and not adding a bunch of things together to get us there. So we'll be going through reality checks, um,
mm,
and then something called the mild technique, and then the wake back to bed technique. And those are pretty much our three that we're really going to focus in on. And there's and we're going to add some additional stuff to it to really kind of just help us out throughout the day. Reality checks is what we start out with, and reality checks is important because it's something that we can do throughout our day and doesn't require us to go to sleep to do, right? And it also
yeah.
affects our waking life in that we maybe can become more aware when we're awake, right? And that's important when we're thinking about court because court is all about awareness. So reality
Right.
checks, um, you can do this very easily. You're awake and you think about something, so like maybe a clock or something like that, or your hands, something that maybe you'd see in a dream experience, um, and you think, am I dreaming, right? So you can look at your hands because hands are a common dream experience. You look at your hands and you look at your hands and you go, am I dreaming? Do they look normal? Um, and if yes, then you're probably not dreaming, right? So these are the experiences you can do. You can look at a clock. Does the clock move as it's supposed to, right? Am I dreaming, right? Um, and you can apply this to anything, really. Um, the problem with reality checks is that the dream experience is going to become so real that you cannot determine the difference between the reality check and a dream. Um, Sometimes it will bleed over, right? Who's in control? We don't know, right? Is it the
Right.
narrator? Is it you? But just having the interest and just performing the reality checks may be enough for the narrator you to say, hey, maybe it's time for you to actually experience a dream, a lucid dream. So then it gives you some lucidity and you're like, okay, maybe you remember in the dream, oh, I need to look at the clock, and you see a clock and it's not ticking as it should be, and you're like, oh, well, I'm clearly in a dream now. Or you look at your hands and you're like, oh, my
Right.
hands are totally messed up, like they're inverted or something like that, and you're like, okay, I'm in a dream experience. Um,
I'm dreaming. Yep.
yeah, and um, but sometimes even just you go, oh, I'm dreaming. I've had this experience where I go, oh, I'm dreaming. I need to look at my hands. So I look at my hands. I'm like, oh yeah, they're weird, you know. I already knew I was dreaming, but then I looked at my hands after the fact.
It's because is it because it's something that you it's your recognition, so you tell yourself that every single time. That's a
Yeah.
trick.
Yes, I
Yeah.
mean, the the unconscious is a hyper intelligent version of you, okay? So it knows
Right.
that your interest is in dreaming and being aware you're dreaming.
Hmm.
So it's going to make you aware in the dream before you're even aware of the dream. And so
That makes sense.
in this case, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm dreaming. I need to look at my hands. It's kind of like
Hmm.
it doesn't make sense, you know, but I already knew that I was dreaming, and then I performed the action because that's what I was trained to do, right? Outside the dream.
Right.
So,
Right.
um, I actually had a lucid dream last night, and I typically don't look at my hands, but just because I was thinking about this course, I think, or this morning actually, I had a lucid dream. So I was thinking about this course, and then I took a nap, and then I realized I was dreaming, and I looked at my hands, and I pushed them together, and they molded into each other, and I was like, oh, okay, you know, it kind of gave me that. I didn't know for sure if I was dreaming or not, but there was like indicators that I was. One,
Yeah.
I slide on the floor a lot, which is weird. So like,
Oh.
um, I was on the couch for some reason, even though I was in my bed. So I was dreaming I was on my couch, and my wife was talking to me, and I was like, I think I'm dreaming, but I'm not sure. But then as I'm thinking
Hmm.
about being in sleep and dreaming, my body is sliding on the floor around the living room, you know, and I'm like, and I still didn't realize that I was dreaming, but
Oh.
I was like,
Yeah.
something's not right here, you know.
Mm.
So then I stood up and I put my hands together and they molded into each other. They like crossed through each other, and I was like, oh, okay, like I'm clearly dreaming now, you know, like okay.
Sure. Yeah.
But sliding on the floor, you
Right.
know, around radically wasn't enough.
Yeah.
So it's quite funny.
That was normal, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we said in the beginning, it's like dreams, lucid dreaming provides us some awareness, into reality, and it's like you have to in through lucid dreaming you realize how much it takes for a person to actually understand that they're dreaming,
Yeah.
and how much it would take for us awake to realize that reality is a dream. It would take so much clear evidence to to tr- to flip us over, be like, oh, okay, clearly
Sure.
this is not a real experience. So
Mm.
it's quite a thing to see that in real time. You're like, oh, geez, I'm pretty sure that I'm dreaming right now, but I don't know. It's
Mm.
quite crazy. So um, throughout the day, back to reality checks. Throughout the day, think of a common theme that you look at throughout the day, or make it something that is hard for you to do but is consistent that you can do, like look at a clock, look at your hands, check about and check often. Okay, my hands working the way they're supposed to. Okay, I'm awake. Or
Right.
and commonly people say, am I dreaming? Am I dreaming? And then that. And frequency, is important at this point because you're going through it multiple times a day and you're asking yourself, am I dreaming? Am I dreaming? Um, think about dream signs and things like that you typically may see in a dream experience that would help you to recognize you're dreaming. That could be a helpful reality check kind of experience. Um, if you're floating, that's a pretty good indicator that you're dreaming. And so you could think about that throughout the day. Be like, okay, if I'm floating, then I'm probably, in a dream
Mm.
state, things like that. And then the physical test, of like taking your hands and physically pushing them together, um, and if they don't go into each other, that's a good indication that you're awake, things like
Right.
that. Not necessarily true, but is useful. um, and so reality checks to me is kind of on the lower end of things to do, but it's something that we can do when we're awake. But
Right.
now we're going to get into things that we can actually do when we're dreaming or asleep and practicing dreams uh, work so that we can actually get lucid, right? And so the first one is what Stephen LeBerg's used to train his uh, testers when he was actually performing his scientific studies on lucid dreams. He writes about this, and it's called mnemonic induction of lucid dreams. And if you've been through the court program, then you understand a little bit about mnemonics. And mnemonics is associations. Um, it's associations to other things, right? So you associate something like a symbol to an emotional experience, and then whenever you see the symbol, then you think about you can activate the emotional experience. And we're doing similar things with lucid dream experiences. We're using associations to trigger lucidity. And so in the mild technique, it's called, which is the um, mnemonic induction of lucid dreams. It's a mnemonic word itself, mild. Um, you first you recall your last dream. So first thing is you wake up from a dream experience, right? Many people wake up in the middle of the night. It's not uncommon that a person wakes up on average 5 times a night. Most times you don't remember this, okay? So this is common. This is a normal number um, that you wake up from. You may remember 1 or 2 times that you woke up each night, maybe if you go to the bathroom at night or something like that. But on average, people wake up 5 times, surprisingly. So when you wake up one of these times, take a moment and remember the dream that you had. Okay? So say I wake up and I have to go to the bathroom, whatever, right? And I get up, I go to the bathroom, and I lay back down, and I'm thinking about the dream I just had. And the dream I just had was me riding a bicycle down the road. Okay, so I'm recalling my last dream of me riding a bicycle down the road. And now I'm going to identify dream signs in the dream. So maybe something happened in the dream that was atypical of me riding a bicycle down the road. Maybe there was like, I don't know, a green elephant that showed up, right? So I look out the side of me riding my bicycle on the road and there's a green elephant. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Or even me riding a bicycle is abnormal because I don't have a bicycle and I don't ride a bicycle down the road since I was a child.
Right.
So I'm like, that's abnormal. But think about the pieces in the dream that may trigger you to say, "Oh, this is actually a dream experience," right? And now we're going to set our intention. So when our intention is when we go back to bed, we want to imagine ourselves as though the next dream is going to be lucid. Okay, so we're
Okay.
imagining what it would feel like if the next dream is lucid. And we also imagine as if the last dream was lucid. So say I'm riding my bicycle down the road and I see the green elephant and suddenly I go, oh, I'm lucid. What is something that I would do in that dream? Well, it's normal for me in a lucid state to kind of check out and go do whatever else I want outside of the narration of the dream. So maybe I'll just get off my bike and I'll start flying. I'll be like, okay, I'm out of here. And I start flying away.
Sure.
I'm like, I'm out. And so that's what I would do. So I imagine myself, oh, I'm going to fly away from, this whole bike experience. And I'm thinking about that. And I'm also thinking about now the next stream that I'm going to have as though it's lucid. Okay. So I'm thinking about
Okay.
all those things at the same time as I'm falling back to sleep. And you can kind of start seeing that association. You're like, oh, okay, I'm training myself to see dream images as dreams. You know, I'm priming myself for the next dream to be lucid when I go back to bed, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm building that association, the emotional experience, maybe the feeling of being lucid, all that together
Mm-hmm.
as I'm transitioning into another dream experience as I fall back to bed, right?
Right.
So that, um, and then the last step is fall asleep with your intention. So as I said, you have all this happening at the same time. You're primed. You have the associations, and now you're going back to sleep. So that, based on peer review research, is the most effective, one of the most effective ways to become lucid. And as we know from court, associations, mnemonic learning, and mnemonic associations is how our brains operate with emotional impacts and primed and intention and all this stuff. It's
Right.
absolutely effective, right? The one that
Mm-hmm.
I like the most, which is actually the easiest of all, is, and peer reviewed is very effective, is called Wake Back to Bed. My good friend Ryan Hurd, who you can Google, has him personally has done research, peer review research to show that Wake Back to Bed is very effective, um, and it is. Wake Back to Bed is essentially how it's described. So you're going to set an alarm. You go to bed. You set an alarm before you go to bed for a period of time that you would feel generally rested from going to sleep and still a little tired, right? Maybe 4 to 6 hours, depending on who you are and how much you sleep. So, say on average you sleep 7 hours of sleep, right? Well, set it an hour before. So you still feel a little tired, but you also feel pretty awake. Then you're going to wake up from your alarm, right? You're going to wake up, and now you're going to stay awake for a period of time. It could be 15 minutes, it could be 30 minutes, it could be 60 minutes. But the point is to wake you up to the point that you feel like I could actually stay up for the rest of the day and I'm a little groggy,
Mm.
but I'm awake. Okay? And now you're going to do something very challenging is you're going to go lay down and you're going to go back to sleep with the intention of having a lucid dream. And this can be very hard for people to do and it can take some practice, but when your body goes back to sleep, your mind is awake now. So your body's asleep, mind's awake, and it transitions you into a sleeping state with awareness. And um, some things that can occur
Mm.
during this transition is encountering like hypnagogia, which is like the transitional phase between awake and sleepiness sleep. Um, and a lot of times when you're laying there and you're not used to this state or this experience, you lay there and you think this is impossible. I'm never going to sleep. I might as well just get up. This is a waste of time. Things like that. But what happens
Mm-hmm.
is if you lay there and you don't move and your intention is to actually fall asleep,
You'll go
oftentimes
to sleep.
you will fall asleep. Yeah. And it's contrary to what you think because your brain says I'm awake, but your body actually still
Right.
tired, and it'll put you into that nice liminal state and then into the dream state with awareness taking place. For me, the wake back to bed is very effective, primarily because when I'm awake, um, I've tried to do straight from being fully awake into a lucid state many times. Like I can't count how many times I've done this and
Mm.
successful probably 0.00001%, right? Like it's happened on, I can count how
Right.
many times in 20 years it's happened on one hand,
Mm.
maybe two fingers, right? And the reason is I have a lot of body pain. So my body
Um,
feels tight and
yeah.
tense when I'm awake. When I go to sleep,
Gotcha.
even in deep meditative states, I still feel my body. I still have that connection to my body. But when I wake up after a period of sleep, my body is very relaxed. And then if I go back to sleep, I don't have that tension that I normally have had, and I can transition into a lucid state much quicker. Oftentimes,
Right.
people experience disassociative type experiences during wake back to bed, and that's where the sleep paralysis experience comes from. Sleep paralysis is
Hmm.
where your body is asleep but your mind's awake, right? Which is kind of what we're trying to get to when we go into a lucid dream state. The issue is that people still think they should be able to move, right? Because it's abnormal for us to be in a paralysis state when our body's asleep or when our mind's awake. So, sleep
Right.
paralysis is a natural phenomenon that happens every single time you go to sleep so that we don't act out our dreams, but it can absolutely cause a lot of panic and terror because we typically think that we should be able to move around when we're asleep or when we're conscious.
Right.
That can happen when you go into this transitional phase. The best thing to do is to relax. Um, Oftentimes people feel some type of vibration coming through their body when this occurs. It can be very strong,
Mm.
almost like a train next to their body happening, like the very intense vibrations. If you relax through it, those vibrations typically go away, and then you transition into a lucid dream state. And also, you have the disassociation type experience of having an out of body experience in these experiences too, quite commonly. You also may hear like sounds like a door being slammed, chiming of bells, singing, um, honking, train sounds, gongs, all kinds of
Mm.
wild sounds during these experiences. And um, the only way that I can describe what those experiences actually are is by saying what I think they are, and been told is that those are actually your chakras being activated as this vibrational energy is going through your body
Hmm.
and putting you into a different state of operation, right?
Makes
So,
sense. Makes sense. You're
yeah,
hearing the frequency tones. Yeah, that makes total sense.
yeah, and
Mm.
there's um, some yogis out there that I trust and they talk about experiences just like I've had, you know. That's when I know I'm like, okay, this people know what they're talking about and
Right.
certain chimes
And you're on the
associate
right track.
yeah,
Yeah.
and certain chimes or certain tones actually associated with different specific chakras.
Mm.
So
Right.
they just make different noises and they
Right.
they attribute it to cavities inside the brain. So limbic system cavities inside the actual brain as being cavities that are vibrating at certain frequencies, and they create those tones inside your head.
We also have crystals
Yeah.
in our
Yep.
ear areas, and
Yeah.
those help some of that, the tonage that you hear,
Yep.
especially because when you meditate with the different frequencies, you get the similar
Mm-hmm.
tones that happen as you're doing that. And
Yeah.
a lot of those they say helps those are what helps vibrate too and
Yeah.
sends up through the body. So that's
Perfect. Yep.
fascinating.
Yeah. So those crystals that you're talking about are piezoelectric crystals, and
Mhm.
they're the exact same crystals that people that we use today in radios, especially aircraft
Right.
radios.
Mhm.
That's how we receive signals. So when they're compressed, they create an electrical discharge.
Right.
And so people that have tinnitus, certain types of tinnitus are actually attributed to piezoelectric crystal compression um, and in certain tones, right? When
Right.
um, say electrical discharges are going through those crystals at certain frequencies, it can create certain sounds or radio sounds and things like that, right? So
Right.
I've I've experienced in lucid dream states radios. Um, I'll hear
Mm.
a radio talk show host talking as clear as day
Mm.
as like they're on the radio, and I can hear
Mhm.
everything they're saying, just like um, you know, as clear as day, just like I'm listening to radio. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? You know, it's it's the wildest stuff you could. I mean, I've had. many psychedelic experiences,
Yeah.
and and those in themselves are a an experience by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Lucid dream experiences are similar but very different in
Mm-hmm.
and they're so much more vivid and real than
Oh,
a
sure.
psychedelic experience.
Because you're not on a substance.
Yes,
You're naturally
yeah.
in a state. So yeah, I can totally
It's
understand that.
just like you take a substance outside your body and it's like, oh, you're shifting to that, you know,
Hmm.
and a lucid dream state's like um, almost the opposite. It's like everything's shifting to you, like it's like, oh, I'm in my natural state now, and I'm experiencing things differently versus like
Oh yeah.
I'm changing my natural state to something else. It's
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah, it's quite not to say that like I definitely have had psychedelics and then gone to bed and had out of body experiences, lucid dreams experiences on psychedelics, and it was just as if I was in lucid state. Like there's no difference. I was like, oh, okay.
Hmm.
Like, wow, this is the same. But when I was awake on those substances, it was radically different than a
Oh, I'm
lucid dream
sure. Yeah.
state. So it's like, well, this is not. The reason I took psychedelics is to see if they were similar to out of body experiences. I wanted to know, and
Right.
and through doing that, I was like, no, they're not the same. Like they're very different, but not to limit either experience by themselves. So,
Right. You
um,
had to have both experience to understand how the
yes,
experiences are different. Yeah,
yes.
I get that.
Um, so we had the reality checks, the mild technique, and the wake back to bed. Um,
Mhm.
and then we have dream journaling. So, dream journaling is a pain in the butt. I'll be the first one to be honest with that. It's hard to wake up and write down your journal or write in your journal what you dreamed about every day. I don't know if anybody actually does that, but some people
My
do.
daughter, my daughter does it with her voice recorder.
Yeah,
As soon as she wakes up, she will grab it and she'll dictate it. And then she doesn't go back to it until a later
yeah.
time and likes to go back and listen to them. And then we've listened to some that she did when she was in middle school. And
Okay.
they're quite interesting to
Yeah.
go back and
Oh
listen to
yeah.
them that far. And I didn't realize that she's been doing it this long. Like
Oh
I knew
wow.
she would do it at times, but like yeah, she has this whole like catalog of just all these different because for some reason she felt compelled to wake up and read her dream, tell what
Nice.
her dreams were. So dream journaling, yes.
Yeah. It's profound in the sense that I think putting effort into letting your unconscious know that you're putting a lot of effort into um,
To remembering it.
yeah, to remembering and that these are important to you and that you're like, oh, I'm actually interested in like learning about this part of my life. I think that's a big part of it. And in that sense, writing down your dreams with pen and paper seems to be the most effective because it actually is like the most painful way to do it,
Well,
right?
sure, because you got to think and it's
Yeah,
got to
it's
go through.
like,
And
oh,
yeah,
my
I
hand and
understand.
all this stuff. Technology is like, it's made it
Hmm.
pretty nice. It's not as painful. Um, and I'll be honest, I use technology to write down my dreams, but um, in that sense, it really hasn't helped me to recall my dreams, but it has helped me to look back in the past quickly and
Hmm.
be like, oh, am I having similar experience? Like, is there a pattern occurring here? Why do I keep
Yeah.
dreaming the same things over and over again? Like what's going on here?
Hmm.
For me, like a repeating pattern in just my normal dreams is like military time. I was in the military before, so I constantly dream of like, oh, I'm back in the military and this whole dialogue is taking place.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
could see it progressing in a weird way, like it has its own like story and all this stuff, and it's like, oh wow, if I didn't write those dreams down, I would never have seen
Oh,
where this is going and
hmm.
actually maybe how to stop it, from occurring. It's almost like PTSD kind of stuff.
Right.
So, Um, so that's important. But dream journaling and the other aspect is like it makes it so that you're aware and you have interest and you put effort into this whole experience, and there's benefits to that. One thing that I do say that is helpful is um, symbolizing the dream experience that you recall. It'd be hard to do in an audio
Mm-hmm.
recorder, but if you could draw a symbol or something like that that represents the
Mm-hmm.
dream, um, oftentimes if you can symbolize it, it actually has like a little bit more of an impact long term on on the experience and easy to recall too. So flip through the pages of your dream journal or whatever, and you see that symbol, you go, oh, I know what that symbol is. I remember the whole entire dream now. That kind of stuff. That's
Oh,
that.
that's real smart to do because that would bring back your whole flood of
Yeah, because
just
the
that
mnemonic,
moment of
right?
that dream. I'm all about using symbols.
Yeah, me too. You and I have we're really into symbols. For good reasons too.
Uh-huh.
So dream journaling is, it's very important to do. Um, it's on my lower end of things besides the reality checks, the mild, and the wake back to bed techniques. Those
Right.
are those are top tier for me. Um, so what do you do um, when you get into the lucid dream, right? Um, first thing you need that it's very common to get excited um, and to lose control of the experience just from that. So excited emotions dislodge the dream experience, and it wakes you up, right? Your heart rate goes
Sure.
up, you become aware of your body instantly, sucked back to your
Mm-hmm.
body sensations. You're like, oh, I'm grounded again, and now I'm awake, right? So that's very
Right.
common for people to experience. They're like, oh, I'm lucid, boom, I'm excited, boom, I'm out. So
Oh,
yeah, it can
that's
last.
good to know.
Yeah, it can last really short period of times if you do that. But so we'll go into like stabilizing the dream experience to keep it extended, you're
Hmm.
right? So you can actually continue forward in the dream. Um, and and so let me see. Going through my notes here real quick. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Um, yeah. So when you initially, it once the lucidity experience happens to you, you're going to be very excited, like I said, um, and it's hard to say like calm down, right? Like to tell somebody to calm down when they're excited, but really, like you
Hmm.
have to learn a little bit about controlling your emotions so that you can be in the lucid dream state longer periods of time. Otherwise, you'll get kicked out. Fear,
Right.
I've talked about fear. Fear is a very big factor when it comes to lucid dream experiences because how our minds are built, right? We first encounter that amygdala, the left amygdala fear state, even when we're transitioning into a dream state. Um, Neurologically, it's known, scientifically, it's known that when you first go to sleep, your left amygdala is activated, you have an intense fear experience, and then you transfer over into the right brain, and then you have your lucid dream experience, right? So there's no difference between lucid dreaming and court. Is that in lucid dreaming a lot of times the only difference is that you don't often experience the left amygdala experience, right? The fear, but um, it can happen. It's very common to happen, right? But it's not always going to happen. Especially when you're dreaming, it's not always going to happen. So when
Right.
we're dreaming, we may have nightmares. Nightmares are not uncommon, but oftentimes we have dreams that aren't associated with fears. But if you have a fear-based dream, you soon wake up after that experience, usually, right? So like
Right.
Freddy Krueger's chasing you, and then you're like, oh, I'm terrified of my mind, and then I wake up, right? The end,
Right.
and you're like, oh my god, Freddy Krueger almost had me, or he got me, and so there's that amygdala, right? Um, when you're going into a dream state from conscious awakening experience, so you're actually transitioning into the dream experience, it will manifest itself in different ways. It may manifest itself as a straight up hallucinatory, very tactile experience of like, oh, there's like a terrifying thing in my room and it's attacking me, right? That's one.
Right.
That's like dream world meeting physical world, and you're like having a dream lucid experience as you transition into the actual dream experience, and your amygdala is activated, and you're like, I am in utter total terror, right?
Right.
Another layer to that would be, I'm paralyzed. I don't know what's happening. I feel scared. I feel vibrations and weird noises taking place. I feel scared. That's another amygdala encounter, right? And then sometimes
Right.
you're unconscious of the entire experience, so then you go into a dream experience, and then you see something in the dream that wakes you out of the dream, right? So you're like, oh, I see the clock and it's not moving the right way because I've been practicing my reality checks. Oh, I'm dreaming. And you're like, oh, I'm dreaming. Oh, okay. And then you go through the dream a little bit, and suddenly something appears in the dream and it's opposing to you, right? And you're like, oh, I don't know what that is. That's kind of scary. And then it gets more aggressive, and then it becomes a left amygdala experience because it's so terrorizing now. And then you wake up, right? So it's
Right.
kind of interesting to think that like the brain is actually like in a way protecting itself, or the mind is protecting itself from you being aware. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
you're not aware. You're not supposed to be aware right now, so we're gonna kick you out of here, because you are. So we're gonna give you
That makes
some
sense. Yeah.
emotion. We're like, hey, dump emotion. Okay, out, you're gone. But if you can be like, oh, okay, I'm not going to respond to these things emotionally,
Mm,
then it has no effect on you, and then the dream keeps going on, and you can see more and more, right? So
right.
it's like it reminds me in my mind right now, like Plato's cave. It's like, oh, you're in Plato's cave and you see the shadows, and the shadows are really scary, right? And you're like, oh, I'm back into the cave, like I can't get out of the cave. But if you see the shadows and you're like, oh, they're just shadows, then you can start seeing more parts of the cave than you normally could. So it's like a weird
Right.
defense mechanism to keep you in this thing, but as soon as you can kind of regulate your emotions, you can start seeing other stuff. So really regulating emotions and staying calm, kind of identifying these things as part of your mind, your brain activating, and you're like, okay, I see this thing. It looks really bad, right? But maybe it's not what I think it is.
Right.
Okay, whatever. You're not gonna hurt me, so and it'll just regulate the experience and the emotions, and you can keep going. Um, there's other things you can do in those states that help you as well, but we'll go into them in the next module. And I've talked about fears in these experiences quite a bit because it's a common theme that people experience, and I would feel bad for people to have lucid dream experiences not knowing that there's this other side to the positive experience, which is the fear-based experience, that is actually very common for people and can be very traumatizing.
Right.
Now, I've had to go through that myself because one of the first out-of-body experiences I've ever had was very fear-driven experience, and you have to sometimes work through kind of those traumatic experiences of your life manifesting um, as an entity in a way, right, to block you
Hmm.
from experiencing a fuller life, right? So it
Right.
takes on a form of its own to stop you from continuing forward until you are mature enough to engage with those things on a level that isn't fear driven. Um, I don't know exactly why that is that way, but that's the way it is, right? So,
Mm.
um,
Right.
it's like a test. In many cultures, they imply that it's a test. It says if you're not ready and you're tested by this, thing, then you're not going to
Hmm.
continue forward because you're not ready to experience the other experiences, which happen to have a lot of similar experiences, but also a lot of good in it, So you kind of need to
Right.
be able to deal with that. So when confronting fears, it's important to see them for what they are. They're experiences of the past. They're not, in a sense, real. They have an emotional quality to them, but you don't have to engage with that. You can see for what it is. You can try to understand it versus like fight it or run away from it, things like that.
Right.
Um, and you have the internal power yourself to confront it, engage with it. You don't need to seek outside help to really do that. It is you. It is you. It is your fear. It is not somebody else's. You can engage with it. You can encounter it, and you can work through it. Um,
Right.
those are the important parts of doing that. So when you engage with that, you can um, you can work through those things. Um, yeah, and so a word of caution is this does occur, right? These fearful experiences. There's lots of positive experiences with lucid dreaming. Clearly, it's very fun, um, amazing in many ways. But there are fear experiences that occur, and strategies to face these fears is remember that you have control over the dream experience itself. Nothing can harm you in the dream, even though there's a lot of dogma and strange beliefs
Right.
online. I can tell you that I have encountered plenty of experiences, entities, and all kinds of things in dream experiences, and none of them have harmed me. Uh, um,
Mm.
the only way that they impose some type of harm is if I believe they can harm me. So it has to do with the
Right.
belief. But once I realized that I had power over the experience, in the sense that I'm a powerful being and I can control these things and nothing can harm me, the show was over with, right? The the
Right.
fear was gone and they had no control. So it's important
Right.
to remember that. Um, and it's a great opportunity to face your fears, right? So it's a great opportunity to experience that. Can be overwhelming because you can't really easily run away, right? Because you're in this experience
Right.
and you can't just open your eyes and turn it off. I get that. I fully understand that, but it's a unique experience to face your fears, and it's a unique experience to or opportunity to grow in this environment that isn't open to a lot of people, right? Not a lot of people in our culture have had these experiences.
Right.
Um, so when we wake up, there's it's like, well, we're done here, right? Like once we wake up from our lucid experience, a lot of people just that's the end of it, and that was cool. Maybe I'll tell my friend or whatever. But um, what I think is important is that we take the dream and we express it in reality in some form, and we reflect on
Right.
it through art, right? And we're kind of doing that in our dream journals. But maybe draw a picture, write a poem, something artistically to express the experience that we had, right? And
Mm.
that will help kind of solidify it and turn it into something real for ourselves, something symbolic that we can experience in waking, in waking reality as we reflect throughout the day on that. So
Right.
next we'll be moving into module two after a short break. But did you have any questions about what we've gone over so far? Um, some questions that people have asked,
No, not yet. Nope.
Okay, so people have asked, maybe how often should I perform reality checks, right? That's a common question.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 10 to 15 times throughout the day, right, would be good.
Oh,
Some a period of time that you can reflect on the question and you can kind of think about it, stuff like that. Um, some people have said that they have troubles remembering their dreams, and how can they improve on that, right? We talked about the possibility of supplements being something that we discover later on.
mm-hmm.
I'll share a link that goes into that. You can read about that on your own, but supplements are definitely help. Also, and we talked about dream journaling as a great way to start building that recall, right?
Right.
Um, how long does it typically take to have our first lucid dream? Well, it could be tonight, right? It could be in a week. I'd say it's typical for people that have not had any lucid dreams to practice wake back to bed or the mild technique, in a week have their first lucid dream. Um, can lucid dreaming be dangerous? A lot of people think, oh, well, if I leave my body, then, an out of body experience, and can that be dangerous? There is nothing in any of the research or any spiritual practices really conclusively that show that any of these experiences are dangerous in any form. Uh, and that's a personal thing I think that people will have to work through. Um, but for me, there is no dangers whatsoever. It's a natural experience that everybody is capable of doing. It's just that most people aren't aware uh, in the way that I am in lucid and dream experiences to have those experiences. So,
Right.
and it would be said by many people that have studied lucid dreams and stuff that people actually lucid dream quite often. They just don't recall it. So they may actually have an out of body experience and just not recall it. And so it's actually just like a natural phenomenon that happens to people and they just aren't aware of it.
My
Um,
question,
yeah.
I have a question. So going back to when you're writing like dream journaling and do you think you become aware, like your body becomes aware you're wanting to have more remembering experiences?
Yes. Um,
Yes.
yeah, I'd say this is a multi-level thing, right? Your body,
Right.
your mind, your soul is is in a way recognizing that you're ready. It's
Right.
actually I would think it would be actually a top-down thing, so soul, mind,
Sure.
body. So the idea that you think that you're ready to become lucid in a dream is actually a end result of other parts of yourself being ready. So
Sure. Yeah, that
because
makes
you think
sense.
that you're actually already ready to do it.
You're ready because of the way it levels
Yeah.
out. Like body
Yeah.
is the last to actually
Right.
respond. Everything else responds before. So that
Yeah.
makes total sense.
So it's all at once, but it seems to be top down, right? Depending on how you see it. So,
Right.
um, so you're like, oh, I want a lucid dream. That's actually the end result of a series of things, knowing that you're ready for that experience. So I know
Sure.
that's
Okay.
it might be hard for some
No, that
people to
makes
think about.
no that makes but that makes sense. Like usually those who realize they want to start lucid dreaming have already had some other these
Yeah,
experiences that have got them to this idea, and they've gotten to that idea because those other things aligned up.
yeah,
So no, that makes total sense.
yeah. It's similar to like, oh, I feel hungry, so I'm hungry. Like I should go eat some
Right,
food.
everything happened internally first. Yeah.
Yeah, but the idea of you being hungry is a result of a bunch of other stuff that already happened to get you to the point that you're that way. So, yeah, and will practicing lucid dreaming have effect on your sleep quality? Yes. So sleep is important to me. Having quality sleep is important. And if you practice lucid dreaming, you're absolutely messing up your normal sleep behavior, especially if you're performing wake back to bed and mild techniques, right? So it'd be great to take breaks if you're having troubles, um, staying awake, things like that during your day, or feeling
Mm.
groggy. It absolutely will have effect on your sleep behavior. So make
What
sure
is what
be cautious
are
of that.
what are your thoughts on like if you do the wake to sleep thing, if you do it consistently at the same time? Like is it are you able to like I do it in the, if I wake up that hour before every morning
Yeah.
and then that, do you think that would help accommodate some of the fatigue that may come from lucid dreaming if
Yeah.
you're consistent at the time you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I see a double-edged sword there. So, um,
Mhm.
the point
Yeah, what
of
are your thoughts?
the point of wake back to bed is actually to mess up your normal sleep cycle because your
Oh,
normal
so if
sleep
you routine, so if you
Yeah,
put yourself in a routine, it kind of, okay,
yeah, it
that makes
counteracts
sense.
it.
That's why I asked.
Yeah, so
Well, that's why I wondered because it
you're
makes the
waking up,
random,
yeah, you're waking up at
the, ra-
an hour or a period of time prior to normal time that you get up. So then your brain
so
is
your
like,
body's like, mm,
yeah, your brain goes, "Hey, I'm awake now," but my body says, oh, "I should still be asleep for another hour," and
right.
then you go
But
back
if
to
you keep
sleep,
doing
and
that,
then
then your body's like, oh, well,
yeah,
this is the time we're supposed to wake up.
yeah,
That makes sense. So the randomness of when to lucid dream or when to put it into
yeah,
practice is probably very beneficial then.
yes,
So that makes sense why needing ample sleep, making sure, if you can nap, do the
yeah,
napping.
yeah.
See, okay, that makes total sense. So, okay.
Yeah, and some people they go, I'm not a napper. They go, oh, I'm not a napper or whatever. You can be trained to nap. So it takes
Hmm.
effort. It takes the ability to calm yourself down. It takes the ability to not move, right, and trust your body that it will go to sleep when it needs
Right.
to do it. It's not something that's like for a lot of people instant. It takes time to practice. This is a practice. But once you get it down, like if I practice lucid dreaming and I get it down, I could put my sleep self to sleep in like 10 minutes, just like boom, I'm out.
Right.
And it's quite magical how how well the body will just do it. Some people are naturally just able to do things, um,
Hmm.
and they're like, oh, I lucid dream every night and all this stuff, and it's like, okay, but they've gained a skill that other
Hmm.
people don't, that they need to train themselves into doing. So, so in this module, the things to do are start practicing the way back to bed and the mild techniques, if that's something you want to
Hmm.
do. Those are the most effective. Work with your dream journal, engage with like reality checks, things like that, and also engage with the community available to you through the Apollo community. We have the dream journal section as well as like the discussions and challenges and all those sections, and then also join our live Q&A sessions if that's an important part of your process, and we'd be glad to answer all your questions and everything like that. So after the short break, we'll go to the next module and keep on rolling.